All right, story time. I'm going to tell you guys about my two worst injuries that actually happened back-to-back days. It was actually up here that it happened where the injury was. I had a group that was bowling on almost all the lanes, actually. I think I had about 8 lanes running. I had a camp in here, and it was lanes 9 and 10. And what happened was they were bowling so many balls down at once down the lane, which caused a major jam. So when the balls are coming down the ramp to go underneath the ground, if you bowl too many, they're going to jam up underneath, causing a floor jam. So when there's a floor jam, I am able to actually lift this piece up right here and be able to take a look up underneath, because they will usually be right in this area and just cluttered with balls. So I told the group, I asked them to stop bowling on both of these lanes so that no more of the bowling balls would come down, and so I was able to pick them up, set them off to the side, and get them out as quickly as possible. Well, this group did not listen to what I said. I told them multiple times, so I decided that since I could hear the bowling balls come, I would do it anyways and just lift up my hand when they started coming. So I was doing pretty good with it until I went to shout out to a girl that I had hired at the time, and she was working the front desk. And I went to call out her name, and when I did call out her name to come help me to grab the bowling balls that I had set off to the side, I didn't hear a bowling ball come. And so when I put my hand back down here, it slammed into my middle finger against the other bowling ball that I was trying to pick up and shattered my bone all the way down. So it was my right middle finger. You can see it's a little crooked, so it is pretty flat and a little bulged out on the side, so I just have a tiny scar left. But when I had picked up my hand, my muscles were actually coming out to my finger, and so I had kind of just wrapped it with my other hand and had called my fiance that owns a business right next to me to come over, and he has worked here for a couple years himself beforehand, so knew how to run things as well. So he took over for me as I ran myself to the hospital. And the next picture will be a picture of the finger after I was in there, so beware, it is not too bad, but pretty gross. I end up driving myself to the hospital as my fiance and I think at the time the 16-year-old girl is, they're both running the place for me. So I go there, I end up getting butterfly stitches for it. They recommended regular stitches at first. I had like 2 different doctors. It was a whole crazy mess, so I just asked for the quickest way of it. So I end up coming back the next day. Obviously can't take a day off because it is just myself really running the place. So I end up coming back the next day. I have a big old splint on my finger. It bled through, I think, 3 times that night. So I come down the next day and I work throughout the day. So I end up coming back here the next day afterwards with a big splint on my middle finger. And there was a ball and pin jam out back of one of my lanes. So what had happened there are boards on each lane. This is what actually separates the pins and the balls. So the pins go up this side and they go all the way up and stack in up here and get pushed through. And the bowling balls actually go through over here and up their own elevator, and they shoot down the ramp. And so what happened was there were so many bowling balls and so many pins at once that this board had actually lifted up, and so I had to come back here and push it down. Oh, what I did wrong and how I could have stopped myself from getting hurt again was that I actually didn't switch off the right switches while I was working on it. So the ones that I should have switched off was the table itself. This is the entire turntable that's trying to separate them. So this I hadn't shut off. And I had the pusher bar was also on, which I should have shut off, and I will show you why. So the pusher bar is up here. It is this bar right here. So right now, and it's in its original position. Once all the pins are full, this bar is going to travel, and it's going to go up and around to then push these pins through into their slots. So what I did wrong was I did not flip that switch down, and I placed my hand just like this to then be able to use my foot and stomp down on this board to lower it so that it would start separating the pins and balls, not knowing that the pusher bar was then going to come across and trap my hand in here. So I end up getting it trapped. I then had to use my other hand that has the big old splint on it, and I used my splint to reach into the machine and flip off that emergency switch. And while I'm doing that, I got my hair caught in the nice gear shaft right here because I also didn't turn off the switch for the turntable. I've got my hair caught in the gears. I've got my hand caught up here with the pusher bar. I have both of my first two knuckles were popped out of place. I was able to shut it off in time for it to not break all of my fingers. And then I also had bled through my splint by using my splint to shut off that switch. So I had to end up using my watch to call my fiance next door, and he had to turn off the machine completely and get my hand pried out of the machine. Luckily, like I said, it was just the two knuckles that were popped out of place. I was able to pop them back into place, but I had a line across all of my knuckles from getting it caught, and I probably had that line there for almost 2 months. So I was incredibly lucky that I didn't break my fingers. So now I'm not so cocky with the lanes, and because I was kind of like, I know what I'm doing here, so I am pretty good with shutting off the right switches when needed, but I just thought that was a cool little story to share about my back-to-back days of my lovely injuries. So